Sikkim 365 Radio is presented by IdealMRI.com. High-quality MRIs for $497 or less. IdealMRI.com. Your health is important, so is your budget.
We have had Bryan Driskell on before, and I remember, and we've had others that cover Notre Dame, but I do remember when Michael Campbell, who's on our text line a lot, Michael loves Notre Dame sports, especially football, said, hey, check out Bryan Driskell with Irish Breakdown. In fact, he joins us again now on Sikkim 365 Radio, 365 Sports. Bryan, thank you, man. I want to start, before we get into the Notre Dame and the conferences and all that, where are they when it comes to their quarterback for the class of 2023? I don't think they have a commitment. Is there anyone on the horizon for that class right now?
Well, they're starting over from scratch to a degree. You know, they kind of put all their eggs in the Dante Moore basket. Things didn't work out. They got a big-time 2024 commit. That kind of shook things up a little bit. So with Dante committing to Oregon, they're going after some other guys. There's a kid from Texas on their board from Dripping Springs, Austin Novosad, who was committed to Baylor. They're reaching out to him. There's a couple other kids, Kenny Minchie from Tennessee, Brock Glenn from Tennessee. So they're just trying to get their foot in the door with a couple kids and see if they can find somebody and flip somebody now that Dante Moore's going somewhere else.
Bryan, you keep those Irish out of the Dripping Springs, Texas area. That's a Baylor community.
Yeah, Austin Novosad's off limits, Bryan.
Yeah,
I don't know if they get the
look, I'm sorry, guys. Texas is becoming fertile Notre Dame ground. You got Braylon James.
Yep.
You got Peyton Bowen, you know. Trying to get Jaden Greathouse to think might happen on Friday. So, you know, it's a great state. What you guys got to learn to share a little bit.
Well, I think Texas shares more than any state ever. But
True.
But in all seriousness, it's interesting because he's been committed to Baylor for a long time. A&M is very much hot and heavy. His parents went there. Obviously, there's the Ohio State factor, and now there's a big boy in Notre Dame also knocking at the door, or perhaps about to knock at the door. All right. Will Notre Dame ever not be independent?
Could there be a day? Sure. Yeah, there could be a day where Notre Dame would not be independent. I think the thing that a lot of people don't quite understand is Notre Dame, they operate on a completely different universe than other people, just how they spend money, how they budget, all these different things. They're just not a program that needs to chase that max dollar deal for TV. And as long as they still have an independent, deal with a network, and as long as they have a path to a national championship, Notre Dame's goal and objective is always going to be independent. And the only conference that I think would make sense geographically is one that really there's a little bit of bad blood there because of the fact that Notre Dame wanted to be in the Big Ten back when they were the Western Conference, and due to some anti-Catholic bigotry and other things, mainly at Michigan, that they were kept out. Now that they're a powerhouse, you want us in now, right? So, and then the other conference that it makes sense, academically in the current league they're in, the ACC, we don't know how long they're going to last. So there's a lot of things up in the air, but Notre Dame is going to do everything it can for as long as it can to remain independent. And I don't think anything that's happening right now is something that's going to force them to change that.
So you don't buy the, look, it's social media, so it is what it is. I mean, it's believe whatever you want to believe, and everybody's got a voice, so it complicates things. But there's no feeling of, if they don't do this, they're going to lose out on massive amounts of money that aren't comparable to what they could get otherwise. Or you don't buy into they're going to be blocked out of the playoff, or any of the multitude of reasons that I've seen for why Notre Dame feels, in the eyes of anonymous people, like they have to, now's the time. You don't see any of that.
I don't. I think the only thing that could happen there is if there was the path to the playoff was changed. And I just, there's no legitimate talk of that happening. It's all, it's coming from the same people that said Notre Dame is going to get left without a schedule in 2020 because they're not in the conference, right? Those same people are saying the same thing, and no one's going to let them join a conference for only a year and leave, right? Sure, ACC did that, and they had their best revenue year ever, despite not having people in the stands and all that. Because why? Because they had Notre Dame. So, I mean, like it or not, I'm not trying to be arrogant. That's just facts, right? But the thing that people have to understand is, and I think this is what is often missed, is people just kind of look at it as, well, so-and-so is offering X amount of dollars, and Notre Dame only makes 26 on their current deal. That's true, but Notre Dame is in a position right now where in the next 3 years, their apparel deal with Under Armour and their TV deal with NBC are all going to expire. which means in the next 3 years, Notre Dame is in a negotiating position to add a big new deal with they signed a $90 million deal in 2014. Those deals are over $200 million now. And then also with NBC, CBS is now without football, right? Because they don't have the SEC anymore. Fox is trying to make big moves. I've heard from my sources that Fox has reached out to Notre Dame about possibly coming over to Fox. And of course, NBC is going to either be, pony up to get Notre Dame or move on. And the thing that about Notre Dame is they don't need the $90 million. Notre Dame, they're going to get a big payday. The way that they operate, the way they do budgets, the revenue that they can produce in the school because of their independence far outweighs just the simple dollar amount of the TV contract. And, this is an institution with a $20 billion endowment, despite the fact that it's a school that only has about 8,000 undergraduate students. Notre Dame is just a different universe than most of the other big-time powerhouses, which are more often than not public schools.
Bryan, there has, I believe, been a time or two when Notre Dame not being a part of a conference could have cost them being a part of the college football playoff. If that ever starts to happen consistently, and I know that consistently it's only one a year, would that then flip the switch?
Perhaps, but I don't think that's been the case. I think, look, in 2015, Notre Dame jumped into the top four despite having an early season loss to Clemson. They fell out because they played like garbage against Boston College and Wake Forest and then lost to Stanford, gave them their second loss. In 2017, Notre Dame lost at home to Georgia, climbed all the way up to number 3 in the rankings, and they fell out because they lost to Miami and lost to Stanford. If they win those games, they're in. And then, of course, this past year, Notre Dame still almost got in, but the reason they didn't get in this year is because they didn't deserve to be in. They went 11-1, but they didn't beat a single team that finished the year ranked in the top 25. So they didn't deserve to be in the top 25 this year. And so that, if they'd have beat Cincinnati but maybe lost to, let's say, Florida State in the opener in overtime, and then, run the table, beat a top 5 Cincinnati, they're 11-1 in that case, maybe they'd have had a better resume. But they didn't deserve to be in last year. I don't think it had anything to do with the conference. They didn't have a resume, and they weren't a good enough team. If they were in a conference and gone and played in the Big Ten championship, they'd have got their butts kicked by Michigan probably, because they just weren't a good team last year. They were a talented team, but they weren't a good team, and they didn't deserve to be in. So I've pushed back against this. There's no evidence to me that if Notre Dame is a legitimate good team with a resume like they've had in 15 and 17 and other years, if they're a one-loss team, I think they'll get in. And the one year that they did get in with a loss, people said, well, that's because you joined a conference. Well, my counter is, well, if they weren't in a conference, they wouldn't even have had a loss because their only loss was in the conference championship game, which they wouldn't have played if they were an independent.
Bryan, when people fantasy book Notre Dame into a conference, if you were to do that, what would be some potential benefits that they don't already experience being an independent?
Well, I think there's I'm going to have a hard time coming up with those,
right?
Because they are in a conference. This is what a lot of people think. Like, they're in a conference. They're just not in a conference for football.
Right.
They're in a conference for all the other sports. And so it's really about football. And, I think the only thing that would maybe be a benefit is if they joined a conference, you could maybe establish some new rivalries if they joined the SEC, or form some kind of alliance with other conferences and reestablish some old rivalries if they joined the Big Ten. But honestly, I think Notre Dame loses its brand power as a conference. Look at Penn State. Penn State went from being a national power as an independent to just a regional Big Ten team.
Yep.
And I think that hurts Notre Dame. And so I think if they were to join a conference, it would be the ACC. But right now, the ACC isn't strong enough for Notre Dame to join, nor do I think Notre Dame could necessarily save the ACC because they have such a bad TV deal that still has over 10 years on it. So I honestly, I'm trying to be as honest as possible for what Notre Dame wants to accomplish. I just don't see what playing in a conference does for them, other than the perception of it gives them a better path to the playoff, which I just don't think exists.
I love, and again, I'm going to sound old here because I am, but when Florida State was independent, Miami, Arizona State, Penn State, Notre Dame, and I'm missing some. Brigham Young.
Well, in 1988, the last time Notre Dame won a national title, the number 1, 2, 4, and 5 ranked teams in the country were all independents, because it was Notre Dame and Miami were 1, 2. They were both independent. I think Florida State finished 4th, and then they were independent, and then West Virginia finished 5th. They were independent. The only team I believe that year to finish in the top 5 that wasn't an independent was Michigan. So, yeah, up until that, and then the next couple of years, you saw Penn State jump to the Big Ten, you saw Miami jump to the Big East, you saw Florida State jump to the ACC, all for TV money. But a lot of younger people forget that. I've had younger people say this, well, Notre Dame thinks they're special. Well, Notre Dame was used to be in the biggest conference of all, the independent area, where most of the biggest amount of teams were. It's the other teams that left to chase the almighty dollar, not Notre Dame. And, they do it for greed. Well, no, if they were greedy, they would have joined the big league way before and gotten a bigger TV deal. Notre Dame has stayed the same. It's the other people that decided to leave the independent, ability and go somewhere else because they couldn't stay independent. Notre Dame could. So why should they be punished for that?
How much do they get a year from NBC in their TV deal?
It's a little over 15 from NBC, and it's a little over 10 for ESPN because of being in the ACC. So they're about $26 million a year right now.
So that's less per year. And again, there's other avenues of revenue, as you mentioned, but that's less per year than any of the other Power 5 conferences and what they distribute.
Correct.
Yeah. You said you don't even know if they join the ACC, if that could save the ACC because of their television deal. If in fact,
Sorry.
No,
go ahead.
You go ahead.
Finish your question. I thought you were done. My apologies.
No, that's fine. If in fact they could join the Big Ten or the ACC, I would think 95% of everybody would think they would join the Big Ten. Is that the wrong number?
I think so. Yeah, because I think a lot of people are looking at it from a geographic standpoint. And there's more traditional rivals in the Big Ten. But number one, we had a 4-piece article about this about a year ago about why Notre Dame isn't in the Big Ten, even though Notre Dame wanted to be in the Big Ten twice. But you got to think about this. Except for Northwestern, all the Big Ten schools are big, giant public schools that are more research-oriented in their and their academic emphasis, right? The ACC has public schools, but it's public schools like Virginia, which is small. It's more liberal arts oriented. It's a high academic institution. They call it the Ivy League, the Virginia Ivy, public Ivy type of thing. One of the best public schools. You look at like a school like North Carolina. You look at schools like Wake Forest, which are private schools. Duke's a private school. North Carolina is not, but Duke's a private school. Wake Forest is a private school. There's more private schools in the ACC. The public schools even are much smaller than you see in the Big Ten. And it's a geographic area that's a lot more important. And Notre Dame doesn't need to be in the Big Ten because they already have that region, right? They're already a power in that region. You take them away from that, and you take away their ability to play all over the country, and Notre Dame stops being Notre Dame. And I just think that there isn't a lot into it except for geographically, your travel's closer. But in this era where the world is opening up to us because of streaming and travel and all this other kind of stuff, you're not going to reduce yourself to being a Midwestern school in a Midwestern conference. That just doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Brian, do you feel like Notre Dame officials even feel the need to have to come out at any point and go like, hey, look, we're staying independent, or are they just going to keep on going about their business, I guess, and ultimately somebody asks them if they're going to ever make a move and they just, no, we're still independent? Like, is it even at that much on their radar that they will feel the need to announce anything?
Well, I think it's in their best interest to kind of make people think they're out there, right? Like, so if you're trying to attract the really hot girl, right, but you're not sure if she likes you, which for Notre Dame is the Max TV deal and the Max, you want to keep those other girls kind of on the, still thinking you're available, right?
Right.
And then if that one says no, then you have somewhere to go to be a little crude with that analysis. But there's no reason for Notre Dame to join the league right now. There's no reason for Notre Dame to come out and say definitively, nope, stop calling us.
Right.
Because this is about business, right? Why would you come out and say, well, there's no way we join the Big Ten when you're trying to get a TV deal? Someone say, CBS, if you don't want to give us big money to get back college football, that's fine. We'll just go join the Big Ten, right, and get $100 million. So it would be silly to kind of give away your bargaining chips in this negotiation with the apparel companies and the TV deals because, like I said, by the end of 2025, which is 3 years away, Notre Dame will have negotiated a new apparel deal and a new TV deal, which is going to bring in a huge influx of cash. You want to keep yourself sort of a player on that market until those deals are signed.
What do you think about the Big Ten and now going out to the West Coast with UCLA and USC?
I despise the Big Ten for so many different reasons. And that was before this, but like it's been such a dumb league for so long. You call yourself the Big Ten, but yet you haven't had 10 schools in your league since 1990. Now you're going out to get 16 teams. You're going out to get it's like all the tradition that supposedly made this game great, you're just shattering. And I thought the Big Ten had a chance to kind of stand as a leader in this college football movement as the SEC tries to do what they do. The Big Ten could have set up and said, "Hey, we're gonna form this quote unquote alliance with the Pac-12, the Big 12, the ACC, and we're gonna stem this tide of the mega conference." Well, for the Big Ten, it was more of like a, "Hey, come into our house, sit down, get comfortable, so we can rob you." That's essentially what they did, and I have zero respect for that. I have zero lack of leadership. It's all a money grab. It's just another one of the million reasons why I just despise the Big Ten.
Kevin Warren just stabbed the Pac-12 right in the back, and everybody's applauding him for it. Yeah.
And I don't feel super terrible for the Pac-12 because you started this when you tried to get Texas and Oklahoma. You started this. But to bring them in as an alliance and the whole way, you're like, we're going to destroy you by taking your only big TV market that anyone cares about, is just, it's such a Big Ten move. I mean, it really is. And it's just reason 500,074 that I absolutely hate the Big Ten and everything it stands for.
Well, I'll tell you this: we have a chat room that it's almost like a heart that beats on its own, and sometimes it's after it's like snorted cocaine the way it is. There are some Big Ten fans that want a little piece of you, Bryan. I'm telling you right now. I appreciate it. No, and everyone has an
Shocker.
opinion.
Big Ten fans don't like something someone from Notre Dame had to say. I am floored, just floored that that's the reality.
Hey, man, thank you very much, Bryan. Appreciate the insight.
Hey, Bryan, I got to ask real quick. I mean, new baseball coach, but also Notre Dame right there jockeying for number one in the rankings. Marcus Freeman continuing to do his thing. It just seems like things are going really good right now for Freeman and company, and also the big news in baseball.
It's fun to be a Notre Dame baseball fan for up until now. Now it's kind of like that scene from Waterboy, like, we suck again, they took all the coaches. So, but hopefully it goes well. Coach Stifler has a great resume, and the football team's red hot. So, yeah, it's a fun time to be covering Notre Dame. There's no question about that.
Thank you, Bryan. Appreciate your opinion. Bryan Driskell, Irish Breakdown with us. That's a great segment. When some of you don't like it, but that's good. We want to make you think.
I mean, whether you like